So here's the thing. Music uses a lot of different harmonies, and these harmonies can create different emotions that make us feel certain things when we listen to the music. But the cool thing is at the root of all of these harmonies, there are only 4 chords that you actually need to know in order to build these diverse palettes of harmonies that we can use. I know it's hard to believe, but in this video, I'm going to be showing you the 4 note formulas that you need in order to build these chords in any specific key you'd like. I'm Sam Vesley, and this is Tonicized. Music is made up of 3 elements: harmony, rhythm, and melody. And with an understanding of all 3, you'll have everything you'll need to play, read, create, and understand music at a much deeper level. Today, we're going to be focusing on the first element, harmonies, how to use them, how you can understand them better, and how you can create them just like that. So what do we need to build these harmonies? Well, we use something called chords in music to create different combinations of notes that create these different sounds that I'm going to be showing you in this video. A chord is a group of 3 or more notes played together to create harmony. Chords are an essential element of music and are found in almost every song you've heard. Chords are essentially tools that we can use to guide our emotional value inside of a piece of music. So whether you're writing music or playing music or doing whatever with music, understanding how chords work is really important. So what are these 4 chords that you need to know that are the basis of every harmony ever? Well, here's the list. I've put these chords in order from easiest to the most challenging, and I'll show you how to build each one of them in this video. First we have major, then we have minor, then we have augmented, and finally diminished. We call these types of chords triads. Just like a tricycle has 3 wheels, a triangle has 3 sides, a triad has 3 notes. Now each of these 3-note chords uses a different combination of notes that really kind of guide where you need to put your fingers on your instrument in order to make the sound. So without further ado, let's dive into these note formulas for each of these triads so you can start playing them on your instrument right away. Each of these triads uses a combination of different intervals, which essentially gives them their unique and distinguishable sound when you hear them.
Whoa here, Sam. What's an interval?
Oh, hi again, Hubert. Great question. And also, great to see you.
Likewise.
So to answer your question here, Hubert, an interval is the specific distance between 2 notes. This distance can either be major or minor, and combining different intervals gives us the chords that we need to create the harmonies, which then creates the emotions. So you can see how an interval is pretty important in music.
Right. I think I get it. So these intervals, they're part of these, whatchamacallem, chord thingies only? Like they're not in music anywhere else, they're just in chords?
Another great question, Hubert. Intervals can be used in chords, for sure, but they're also used in melodies as well. And looking at a melody, you can look at one note to the next note, and that would be an interval. That note to this note, that would be an interval. Now, I'll definitely talk about this in a future video, but for now, I think I'm just gonna focus on the chords, if that's cool.
Absolutely. But how do I tell which interval's major and which interval's minor? It just don't make sense.
Geez, Rupert, these questions are amazing. It's like you know exactly what's missing from my script so that someone can get a better understanding of what we're talking about. Are you reading my scripts?
No, I would never do such a thing. Now, you gonna answer my question or not?
Well, that's not very nice, Rupert. I was giving you a compliment.
I'm sorry. I just haven't had my midnight nap today. I'll get really grouchy if I don't get my nap.
Okay, that makes sense. All good. No worries at all. Let's dive into the question. Intervals are created using the key signature of the bottom note. So let's say you have an interval starting on D and you wanted to play a major 3rd interval. Well, to play a major 3rd, we would have to consider D major's key signature, which has an F sharp and a C sharp in it. Moving up 3 notes from D, we get to F. And because of our key signature, we have to use F sharp. F sharp being in the key of D major, this makes sense that this would be a major 3rd. But to make it minor, we would lower it down using a flat. Lowering it down by a semitone or a half step, forcing the note outside of the key signature, we still have that 3-note separation, meaning that we can call this a 3rd, but making it a minor 3rd. This at a basic level is what makes the interval minor, whether it's inside or outside of the major key signature that we're using. In other words, major intervals are inside the key signature and minor intervals are outside of the major key signature.
Holy camole! I'm gonna go make me some intervals. You take care of yourself.
My pleasure, Rupert. Thanks for swinging by with all these great questions. I hope you have some fun with those intervals, and I'll see you soon. Let's talk about the first triad of the four, the major triad. A major triad is a chord that has a happy and bright sound. It's made up of a root note, a major third interval, and a perfect fifth interval. So, let's say, for example, we take the scale of C major and give them numbered positions. To build our triad, we're going to be using the 1, the 3, and the 5 of our scale. Or if we use the major chord formula, 1, 3, 5. In the key of C, the notes of C major chord would be C, E, and G, as these are the 1, 3, and 5 of that particular scale. We've used the first note, the third note, and the fifth note to build our beautiful and lovely major chord. But if we were to build a D major triad, we'll need to use the first note, the third note, and the fifth note of the D major key signature to ensure it still sounds happy, like a major chord should. So using the 1, 3, and 5 of the D major key, or the D major scale, applying D major's key signature, we'll get D, F sharp, and A, making that happy sound that we all recognize as the major sound. This sounds exactly like C major, just in a different spot. As you can see, the key signature is pretty important, and it will help you find the correct notes that fit within the note formula of the major triad. Let's move on to the next chord. The opposite of happy is sad, and in music, the opposite of major is minor. Creating a minor chord is easy, as we only need to change one note to ensure that we create the sad, melancholy sound that is the minor chord. A minor chord is made up of the root note, a minor third interval, and a perfect fifth interval. Or if we use the note formula, 1, flat 3, 5. For example, the notes of C minor would be C, E flat, and G, as we've lowered the third note by a half step, making it E flat. Now, using the minor chord formula in different key signatures can get a little confusing, because there's lots of sharps and flats that we have to worry about as we kind of go around the circle of fifths. So, I'm going to use an example of D major and apply the note formula of the minor chord to hopefully show you how you can start applying this to different key signatures down the road. Here we are, back in D major. It still has two sharps, F sharp and C sharp, but this means that we have to really take this into account as we apply our minor chord formula. To make our minor chord in D major, we simply have to lower the third note by a flat or a half step, making it that minor third interval, or flat 3. By making the third note flat, we've taken the chord outside of the usual key signature of D major and made it sound sad by moving the F sharp down to F natural, major third to minor third. This step can be a little bit overwhelming at first, but as long as you have that key signature established before you apply the formula, you'll be good to go. So we've created our major chord and our minor chord. Happy chord and sad chord essentially. And we've only done this by changing the third note of our 1, 3, 5. But what if we changed the fifth note? Well, let's dive into the last two chords of the four to show you what other options are out there in terms of creating harmonies. So let's reset and go back to our major chord progression. This chord progression was the 1, the 3, and the 5 of our major scale. But we can extend our chord a bit farther beyond our 5-note stretch by creating what's called an augmented chord. An augmented chord is a chord that has a tense and suspenseful sound. I also like to call this the spy chord because it kind of sounds like Mr. Incredible or like a spy movie and they're transitioning from one scene to another. Kind of like this. An augmented chord is made up of a root note, a major third interval, and an augmented fifth interval, or a sharp 5. So if we build our chord on C, the notes of the C augmented chord would be C, E, and G sharp. This makes the chord formula 1, 3, and sharp 5. Now the augmented chord is the lesser used out of all four of these, and if you're a beginner, this is kind of like a transition chord, and that's about it. So in the next video of the series, you're going to learn why this is and why the augmented chord isn't used as much, but it's still a good tool to know in order to kind of spice up your music a little bit if you want to. Finally, we've arrived at the final chord formula that you need to know, the diminished chord. This chord has a tense and unsettling sound to it. So think of Alfred Hitchcock movies where there's like that really intense scene. This chord's often used in horror movies or anything tense in that kind of realm. The diminished chord does a fantastic job of emulating that emotion. Diminished chords are made up of a root note, a minor third interval, and what's called a tritone. The tritone is an interval that sits nicely between the perfect fourth and the perfect fifth interval and sounds extremely crunchy, like this. Correction, it sits uncomfortably between perfect fourth and perfect fifth. It's really tense. The tritone makes the diminished chord unstable, giving it that spooky quality that makes it recognizable. The formula for the diminished chord then is 1, flat 3, and flat 5 in whatever key you're building your chord. For example, if we start to build our chord on the note C, then the notes of C diminished would be C, E flat, and G flat, as we've used the 1, the flat 3, and the flat 5. This is the note algorithm for the diminished chord. Now, if we were to take this to D major and follow the same formula, we'd have D as the first note, F natural being the flat 3, and A flat being the tritone, or the flat 5. These chords are crucial for knowing how to play any song that you want to learn, because these are the foundations of all harmony in music. You can take these four and start expanding and growing to make the big complex harmonies you hear in jazz music, orchestral music, you name it, these four chords are there. So let's review all of the formulas one more time just to make sure you have a complete, full understanding of what they are and you can memorize them to apply them to any key signature you'd like. To build a major chord to create a happy sound, we use the 1, the 3, and the 5 of the major scale. To build a minor chord to create a sad sound, we use the 1, the flat 3, and the 5 of the major scale. To build an augmented chord, we use the 1, 3, and sharp 5 of the major scale, creating that tense spy sound. And to create a diminished chord, making that super spooky sound, we're going to use the formula 1, flat 3, and flat 5. These formulas focus more on the positions and the patterns that you need to use in order to create the specific sounds, rather than memorizing which notes belong to which major chord, which minor chord, diminished, augmented. It makes it 10 times easier to move between key signatures. Now, before I wrap up this video, I want to make sure that something is extremely clear. If you are starting to build your chord on whatever note you decide, you have to use the key signature of that note, number 1. If you use the key signature of number 1 in each formula, you'll be able to apply each of these formulas easily, without confusion. If you forget that step, well, you're gonna have some strange sounding chords and a very frustrating practice session. So be sure to use that key signature of number 1. I hope you liked this video, and if you did, be sure to subscribe to the channel because I'm gonna be making more videos about music theory and other stuff related to music to hopefully spark musical passion in every single person that checks out the channel. Thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time on Tonicized.